Rap albums have lost a lot of the luster that they had in previous years, and I know everyone wants to talk about album sales right now and album sales just being overall down in rap, and that's kind of a hot topic. I myself even made a video discussing this topic, but no one really seems to be talking about the fact that rap albums as a whole are kind of losing a little bit of their value. And in my opinion, albums losing their importance in rap and rap culture takes away a lot of the artistry in rap culture. The genre itself is consistently moving forward and has been since its beginning, inception over 50 years ago now, and it's consistently gotten more and more commercialized as we've gone into the future. And that's just all things in music, right? Music is always trying to balance itself between the art side of things and the commercial side because people want to make money, but it really feels like right now, rap is leaning a little bit too heavy towards the commercial side. What's good, YouTube? It's Justice I Used to Be Paying. Today I'm back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing the fact that I believe rap albums have lost a lot of their value. But before I get into that, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Do all those things. It helps me out a ton. A major part of albums losing their value in rap is just the fact that over the last 10 to 15 years, and especially now in this modern era, a lot of the rising stars in rap are much more singles artists than they are anything else. And there's no like technical dictionary definition for what a singles artist really is, but this is just my definition. It's just somebody who is much better, clearly much better at singles than they are at making full-length projects or albums of any sort. Now, that doesn't necessarily make them a lesser artist, but that's just a lot of the artists that tend to be rising nowadays. They tend to be people who are much better at making singles than they are at making albums, and it seems that their focus seems to much more be on singles rather than projects themselves. For an example of this, look at somebody like Kodak. Now, I know people might see this and hear that and think, oh my gosh, he's talking bad about Kodak Black. I love Kodak. He's 2016 freshman, double XL. How can you say? But when you really look at Kodak and who he is and his career and his legacy, he doesn't really have a lot of albums that are just like classic albums. Like when people talk Kodak Black, they're bringing up singles for the most part, right? Not to say that he hasn't made a good project, not to say that anybody who's a singles artist can't make a good album. Just in general, when people talk about Kodak Black, they're talking about singles. They're not really talking about his classic albums. He doesn't really have anything that people consider a classic album. He has good projects here and there, but for the most part, when you talk Kodak, you're talking singles. That's what I mean by a singles artists. Not to say, again, singles artists can't make good projects. Just in general, that's not really their lane. Right now, there are a lot of artists on the come up that really either just don't care about albums or don't really focus on them, or just in general aren't really good at putting them together. They just have to make albums because labels want that from them, and that's oftentimes how labels end up structuring contracts, like we need 3 or 4 albums from you in this certain time period. So that's kind of why they still end up making albums, despite the fact that some of them just really don't want to. Look at somebody like Ice Spice. I think she's a perfect example of this. I know right now she's a super easy target because she just dropped an album and it was pretty bad. But regardless, she is an artist that lives off of singles. She just needs one single every couple of months that goes somewhat viral, hits the billboard somewhere, and she's good. Like, she's chilling. That's kind of what she's really good at doing. Another one, for example, is Boss Man D-Lo. Boss Man D-Lo is killing it right now, off of singles pretty much. He's not really dropping an album and everyone's like, oh my god, this is the best piece of music ever, but he's dropping a whole bunch of singles back to back to back, and people are loving these singles, and then I guess, he'll put them together for an album. So this isn't me saying that nobody wants to hear an album from Boss Man D-Lo or an album from Ice Spice. Just in general, that's not the focus. That's not really where they get their come up off of. And another example of that is somebody like Sexy Red, or maybe even Boston Richie or Von off 1700. These artists get their hype from singles. They depend on this environment and they deliver in this environment. And oftentimes, again, like I said, if they didn't have to drop an album, they probably wouldn't, or they probably wouldn't very often. I don't think Ice Spice would have dropped her album right now or, a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was, if her label probably didn't force her to. Like, I just don't believe that these are guys that really want to make these albums and make these projects. A lot of the artists that are blowing up right now are blowing up in their singles artists because they're kind of gimmicky rappers in a way. And that's not for me to say that gimmicky rappers are a new thing. Soulja Boy is literally knocking on a 20-year career right now. 20-year career for Soulja Boy. So yes, you watching this video, you're old, but that's besides the point. Gimmicky artists aren't anything new. But the thing about the internet is that Gimmicky artists tend to blow up a lot faster now than they did in the past because it's the internet. And everyone is kind of somewhat good at making music now. Like a lot of the times, everyone's like at a baseline in general, right? So something has to stand out. And oftentimes the things that stand out are gimmicks. And the thing with gimmicks is that they're typically not very deep. They typically don't hold people's attentions for very long. They're very easy at getting people's attention for a quick, 2-minute song or maybe a quick TikTok or a quick IG story. But the thing with gimmicks is they don't hold people for long and they're not that deep. There's not that much there beyond the gimmick more times than not. And that's why somebody like Sexy Red can drop banger club anthem songs that everyone wants to hear in the club and everyone's turning up to, but people aren't really showing up to listen to an hour's worth of Sexy Red content when she drops an album. That's just kind of how things go with gimmicky artists. Again, not trying to downplay these people because I like some of Sexy Red's music, but am I going to sit down and listen to a Sexy Red album in an entire sitting while I'm, working or, mowing the lawn? No, I'm probably not going to do that because she's a gimmicky artist. She fits a specific role and she's great at that, but outside of that, there's not that much there. And that's why when I look at people like her or Bossman D-Lo, I look at them as the perfect accessory pieces to a tour. I don't look at them as tour headliners because they can get people's attention. They can turn people up. But again, do I really want to sit there for an hour-long Sexy Red concert, hour and a half of Sexy Red on stage? Probably not. Do I want to sit there for an hour and a half of Bossman D-Lo on stage? Probably not. But would I love to see them before Drake comes out or before Travis Scott comes out? Would Sexy Red be great before Lil Durk comes out and finishes the tour? Probably, right? They would fit that role really well. Streaming services themselves are also to blame for why albums have lost some of their value because overall it's just kind of harder to make money off of albums with streaming because streaming is a lot different than just going and buying an album for $15, $10, however much they cost. Because with streaming, it takes around 1,500 streams in order to get one album sale, I believe is the exact conversion or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. The exact measurement, it's like 1,500 streams for one album sale or something like that. And that's a lot. That takes a lot. So not only do you as a rapper have to get hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, or maybe even millions of people to listen to your project, to make a return on that, to make the money back off that, you have to get them to consistently come back and listen to that project. It's not enough for them to just listen to it once, listen to the whole thing, and then just be like, okay, I'm done. You need them to consistently be coming back. While in the past, all you had to do was get these people to buy it at least once. That's all you really needed. And if they never listen to it again, it doesn't matter. If they never listen to it in general, if they just bought it and it sat in the little plastic wrap on their, in their CD shelf or whatever, it didn't matter because you already got that sale. You didn't need them to consistently keep coming back in order to make money off of the music. And that's what makes it a little bit harder for artists. That puts a little bit more pressure on the artist to make money off of the album. You need to have people coming back. There's more pressure. There's a little bit less room for the artist to just be like, okay, I know that guaranteed I'm going to have this specific number of buyers. I can relax a little bit on trying to make things super commercial and focus a little bit more on the art. Now, of course, people have been trying to make money with music forever. So it's not like people were never focused on making money. They've always been focused on making money. But now the focus needs to be a little bit more intense as you need people to keep consistently coming back in order to make this money. So some of the things you might want to do for the sake of artistry instead of and sacrificing a little bit of that commerciality, you can't really do those things. There's more pressure nowadays than there was in the past. There's just a little bit less breathing room. There's a little bit less room for error for these artists when it comes to making money on their projects. And this is just because streaming is inherently less valuable than somebody going and actually buying a copy of the project. And this is why oftentimes today we'll see these projects come out and they're all 20 to 25 songs long. And it's not because the art itself calls for a 20 to 25 song long album. It's because the more songs you put on an album, the more opportunities you have to get more streams. And this is why we have a lot of albums come out today and they have a lot of filler on them. They have a lot of stuff on these projects that, maybe 5 or 6 songs a project probably wouldn't have made the cut back in 2010, but they're making the cut now because they need to make money off of these projects. So they have to focus more and more on giving themselves the opportunity to make money rather than just focusing on the art. And this is also why a lot of albums nowadays end up being stacked with features sometimes because they need to pull from all these other fan bases. So rather than just them dropping their own album and maybe it's 18 songs and has 4 features, now they're dropping a 25 song album with 13 features because they need to pull from as many places as they can to make money and forget the actual art for the sake of art. They need to make this art for the sake of the dollar. Rappers nowadays oftentimes aren't creating albums, rather they're just creating collections of songs, really. And of course, technically an album is a collection of songs, but these projects that come out tend to not really be a cohesive unit. They don't always have a theme idea-wise or sonically, and this is because artists that have a lot of label pressure on them to make money can't just make whatever they want to make for the sake of art. They have to make money in order for that label to continue to fund their career and the things that they want to do, or even to make back the money that the label already paid them up front. So these guys end up in situations where they're sacrificing their art in a place that generally wasn't the place to sacrifice art. And that was the album. The album was kind of the place where, okay, you got to make money, but this is the place where you really show off who you are as a rapper and an artist. And that's been kind of lost. Rappers making music specifically for commercial purposes isn't a new concept. It's been a thing for a very long time. It just used to be called radio music. It was music specifically for the radio and movies and TV shows and whatever the hell else, department stores, all that type of stuff. Nowadays, I guess you would call that stuff like TikTok music or music for social media. And you can look at, for example, Workout by J. Cole. That is still arguably one of his biggest songs ever, right? Workout, and it's still being played on the radio to this day. Like when I get in my car and my phone hasn't connected to the Bluetooth yet for those like 5 seconds, sometimes I will still hear Workout being played on the radio. It's a huge song. It did exactly what its purpose was, and that was to blow J. Cole's name up even more and get him into the eyes of pop culture and get it played on radio stations outside of even just hip hop. But that song didn't really have his heart in it. That wasn't real hip-hop rap. That wasn't something that really came from his soul or anything like that. And that's why he ended up making the song Let Nas Down later on down the line, because that was something that Nas noticed himself. He heard the song and he hated it because it was for commercial purposes. It was for the radio. It wasn't something that was really of J. Cole. And we can even look at Lollipop by Lil Wayne. That is a song that serves a similar purpose. It's a radio song. It's something to be played all the time and at middle school dances and all that stuff. But it's not really like something that was on his mind, something that was really hip hop, something that was really art. Not to say it wasn't art, but like you understand what I'm getting at. It was for commercial purposes. But the thing about these songs back in the day is that these were advertisements. These were songs that were supposed to entice you to be interested now in this artist and to go and listen to the album. They were just basically huge pieces of bait. And they oftentimes worked because people who didn't really know that much about J. Cole, after they heard Workout, they were super interested. So it tied them into the art that was coming on the album. Except nowadays, albums end up being kind of compromised for the sake of commercial success, while back in the day, sometimes they could keep that out of their album. They didn't have to completely compromise their album for commercial sake. They could just throw out the commercial bait, bring people in, and show them the true art that was waiting on them. But nowadays, oftentimes that line gets blurred and these albums end up compromised. The line between a mixtape and an album in 2024 is literally just whatever is listed as the category at the very bottom of the page on the streaming service. Mixtapes and albums used to have very different energies, very different vibes, very different feels. Mixtapes were either free or like really, really cheap, and they really just existed in order to get the artist's name out, in order to build anticipation and give you a taste of what they can really do before they drop that highly anticipated album. That was kind of the whole deal with mixtapes. They were very different. It was just a lead up into the big deal, which was the album. But nowadays that doesn't really exist because of streaming services. Mixtapes have kind of lost their purpose and lost their way, really, in a sense, because mixtapes used to just be like a collection of really hard hitting songs. And oftentimes they didn't necessarily fit a theme. They didn't have to. I mean, some that were really good did, but overall, they really didn't have to. They were just really supposed to give you a taste of what this artist can do and really draw you in. Or sometimes it would just be a collection of music that didn't really fit into necessarily an album specifically in that theme of the album, but it was just good enough to where people wanted to hear these songs. Rap albums have really lost their aura. Like, no matter who the artist was, no matter who the rapper was, when it was time for that album, that's when things really got serious. That's when people really had to lock in. And these albums were a huge deal. Nowadays, albums don't really have that sort of aura or importance unless they're coming from like a few guys, and it's the usual suspects, Travis, Cole, Kendrick, that echelon of guys at the very, very top. But outside of those guys, rap albums don't really have an aura anymore. They don't really have that level of importance that they used to, where it was like, man, this is a really big deal no matter what the artist is. Not necessarily like a big deal like everyone knows and everyone's talking about it, but it was a big deal specifically for that artist. Now, that's not me saying that albums are no longer newsworthy or they don't really break headlines or anything like that, because of course they do. They just don't have that same level of respect and aura that they used to. The expectations of an album being an exploration of an artist and their art isn't really there anymore. We as fans hope that that happens on albums, but we don't really expect that anymore. To make a comparison, I really used to compare mixtapes and albums and singles and all that stuff to the NBA, where singles and mixtapes are the regular season. And yes, the regular season is super important. It sets up the postseason. It makes people interested in what's going to happen in the postseason. There can be huge, massive, historic moments in the regular season. The regular season really does matter. But at the end of the day, there are 82 games in a regular season in the NBA. So, not every single game in the regular season is that important. They can be super important. The Christmas game is important. Martin Luther King game is important. The games between your rivals are important, but not every single game, every single song or mixtape is super important. You can slack off here and there. But when it was time for the playoffs, which was the album, that's when you had to lock in. That's when everyone is giving their 100% effort. That's when everyone is really trying to go and win that championship. That's when defensive intensity rises. That's when the game slows down. That's when every single bucket matters. But now in music, and specifically rap and rap culture, everything feels like the regular season. People are throwing away albums nowadays. Albums are just considered throwaways. Like, it's crazy. There's not that level of importance that there once was. That aura, that respect isn't really there anymore. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. This is just my opinion on how I feel about rap albums and how they've lost their value in the recent years. But maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know down below in the comments how you feel about this conversation. And if you made it this far, I greatly, greatly appreciate you. Like, I truly, truly do. Make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. It helps me out a ton. I go by the name of Pay. Peace.